Ferrari came within 1.952 seconds of winning at Spa, but Fred Vasseur has now exposed why that result was far more alarming than it looked. Charles Leclerc took the lead. Ferrari nailed the strategy. George Russell was out. Mercedes had only one car left in the fight, and Ferrari still could not stop Kimi Antonelli. The reason was not one bad pit stop, one driver error, or one unlucky call. It was a weakness Ferrari had been hiding for months, and Spa exposed it every time the track opened into a straight. Vasseur admitted Mercedes had the quicker car. Ferrari was losing speed exactly where Leclerc was most vulnerable, and the final gap disguised how serious the problem really was. Because Ferrari did not lose after a bad race. Ferrari lost after almost everything went right. Subscribe to the channel, because the final detail reveals why Ferrari never truly caught Mercedes, even when Leclerc was ahead. Spa does not hide weakness. At some circuits, a clever setup can protect a car. A driver can defend through slow corners. A team can use strategy to control the race. But Spa forces every machine to reveal what it truly has. The circuit demands confidence through high-speed corners, stability under braking, and strong acceleration over long stretches where there is almost nowhere to hide. Ferrari knew that before the race began. Fred Vasseur had already warned that tracks like Silverstone and Spa would be difficult. Ferrari had improved its chassis, and those upgrades were beginning to work, but the team still carried one major weakness: straight-line performance. That weakness did not make Ferrari uncompetitive. It made Ferrari vulnerable. And that difference is important. A vulnerable car can still fight. It can still qualify well. It can still gain positions at the start. It can still use strategy to move ahead. But once a faster rival gets close enough, the driver in front is forced to defend instead of attack. Ferrari entered Belgium knowing it might need the race to become unpredictable. Then, almost immediately, it did. George Russell's Mercedes suffered a boost and energy deployment issue after the first corner. His car did not deliver the acceleration he expected, and he began falling through the field. Within seconds, the order was breaking apart. Then Lewis Hamilton made contact with Russell at the fifth corner. The Mercedes spun, and Russell's race was over. One of Ferrari's biggest threats had disappeared on the opening lap. But Charles Leclerc was not waiting for luck to do everything. He attacked through Eau Rouge and passed Russell and Max Verstappen, moving himself directly behind Kimi Antonelli. It was one of the most important moments of the race. Leclerc had not simply gained 2 positions. He had placed Ferrari inside the battle for victory. With Russell gone, Mercedes had only one car at the front. It could no longer divide its strategy. It could not use one driver to pressure Ferrari while the other protected Antonelli. For the first time, Mercedes looked exposed. Ferrari only needed Leclerc to remain close enough to threaten the pit window. Close enough to force Mercedes into a defensive decision. Close enough for one unexpected moment to change the entire race. That moment arrived with the virtual safety car. Every driver had to slow down. The normal cost of entering the pit lane suddenly became smaller. Ferrari reacted. Leclerc stopped at the right time and gained a powerful strategic advantage. When the race settled, he had moved into the lead. Now Antonelli had to chase. Ferrari had clean air. Ferrari had track position. Ferrari had removed one Mercedes from a fight, and Ferrari had used the timing of a race almost perfectly. This should have been the turning point, but beneath the surface, the danger had not disappeared. It had only moved behind Leclerc. Antonelli began closing the gap in small pieces, a fraction of a second on one straight, another fraction after the next corner. Nothing looked dramatic at first, but those tiny gains kept returning. And the closer the Mercedes came, the more Leclerc had to think about defense. That was the first warning, because Ferrari had taken the lead through strategy. Mercedes was beginning to take it back through speed. But strategy can only protect a slower car for so long. Once Antonelli settled into the chase, the shape of the race changed. Leclerc was still leading, but he was no longer controlling what happened next. He was reacting, and that is one of the most dangerous positions for any driver. When you are attacking, you choose the moment. You decide where to apply pressure. You decide when to use the tires, when to use the battery, and when to force the car ahead into a mistake. When you are defending against a faster car, those choices begin to disappear. The driver behind determines the pressure. The driver behind decides when the threat becomes real. And the driver in front is forced to respond. That was Leclerc's problem. Through the corners, the Ferrari remained competitive. The chassis upgrades were helping. Leclerc could stay precise, protect his lines, and keep the car balanced through sections where confidence mattered. But every time the circuit opened, the Mercedes moved closer. The most revealing example came after Eau Rouge and Rydillon. The cars climb at full speed, reach the crest, and launch onto the Kemmel Straight. At that point, the driver has already committed. There is no clever line that can suddenly create more power. There is no defensive trick that can manufacture acceleration. The car either has it, or it does not. Antonelli had it. Leclerc did not have enough of it. That does not mean the Ferrari was dramatically slow everywhere. In fact, that is what made the situation so difficult to understand from the outside. The gap was not created in one huge moment. It was created in small, repeated losses. A little more speed from the Mercedes at the corner exit. A stronger release of electrical energy. Less resistance as the car accelerated. Then another small gain before the braking zone. One difference may look harmless. Several differences stacked together become an overtaking chance. Imagine two people trying to push open heavy doors. One person has a strong initial push, but loses momentum as the door moves. The other applies force more efficiently from beginning to end. At first, they appear equal. Then one door begins moving faster. That was the difference Ferrari was fighting. Leclerc could match Antonelli through sections of the lap, but the Mercedes completed the acceleration phase more effectively. And once Antonelli moved close enough, Leclerc had another problem. He had to defend. Defending sounds simple. Put the car on the inside. Make the rival go the long way around. Protect the braking zone. But every defensive move has a cost. The fastest line through a corner is usually smooth and open. A defensive line is tighter. The car turns more sharply. The driver may have to slow down more. The exit is often weaker. That weaker exit creates a slower run onto the next straight. Then the car behind becomes even more dangerous. Leclerc was trapped inside that cycle. The closer Antonelli came, the more Leclerc had to protect the position. The more Leclerc protected the position, the more speed he risked losing. And the more speed he lost, the easier the next attack became. This was not a battle Ferrari could solve with one perfect lap. It was a battle Leclerc had to survive again and again. Antonelli only needed one clear opportunity. That difference placed all the pressure on Ferrari. Leclerc had to be perfect through every braking zone. He had to manage the tires without surrendering pace. He had to release energy at the right moment. He had to defend without becoming too slow on corner exit. And he had to do all of that while watching a Mercedes grow larger in his mirrors. Antonelli's task was simpler. Remain close. Force the Ferrari to defend. Wait for the straight line advantage to create the opening. This is why Vasseur's explanation matters so much. He did not blame Leclerc. He did not point to a failed strategy. He did not describe the defeat as one missed chance. He said Antonelli had the quicker car, and Ferrari was losing on the straights. That statement removed the easy excuses. Ferrari had not thrown the race away. Mercedes had taken it back. And there is a major difference between those two stories. When a team throws away a victory, the solution may be operational. Improve the pit stop. Make a better decision. Avoid the penalty. Give the driver cleaner information. But when the rival simply has more performance, the solution becomes much harder. It requires development. It requires understanding where the time is disappearing. And it requires the team to solve the problem without damaging the areas that are already working. That last part is critical. Ferrari could reduce aerodynamic resistance and gain speed on the straights. But if that change removed too much grip, Leclerc might struggle through the fast corners. The team could search for stronger acceleration. But if the energy was used too aggressively early in the lap, there might not be enough available later. The engineers could chase maximum speed. But Formula One cars are not built for one section of one circuit. Every improvement must survive the complete lap. That is why Vasseur kept describing Ferrari's progress in small steps. The team was not searching for one magical part. It was trying to improve the entire balance. And Belgium showed how close Ferrari had come. But it also showed how much remained unfinished. Leclerc had the position. Ferrari had the opportunity. The strategy had created the perfect challenge. Yet Antonelli continued approaching. The pass itself was only the final moment. The Real defeat had been building long before the Mercedes moved alongside. It began every time both drivers accelerated and the Ferrari lost another small piece of control. The pass was coming, but Ferrari's real problem was larger than one overtaking move. Because once a team knows it is losing in a straight line, every other decision becomes harder. The driver cannot attack freely. The engineers cannot chase maximum cornering grip without consequences. The strategists cannot assume track position will be enough. And the pit wall begins managing a race that is slowly moving out of its control. That is what made Spa so revealing. Ferrari had created the perfect conditions for a challenge. Leclerc had clean air. The team had already used the virtual safety car well. Russell was no longer a factor. Antonelli had to recover the lead on the circuit. But Mercedes did not need another strategic gift. It only needed time. Each lap gave Antonelli another chance to study the Ferrari. Where was Leclerc strongest? Where was he protecting the battery? Where was the rear of the car beginning to move? Where did the Ferrari lose its best acceleration? A driver following closely is not only trying to pass. He is collecting information. He watches how early the car ahead brakes. He notices whether it struggles to rotate into slower corners. He studies the exits. He looks for the moment when the driver in front has to compromise one section to survive another. Antonelli was learning. Leclerc was defending. And that difference increased the pressure with every lap. Ferrari also had to consider the tires. Defending can damage them faster. When a driver moves away from the ideal racing line, the tires slide more. The car may need a sharper steering input. The rear tires may work harder on the exit. One defensive lap may not cause a major problem. Several defensive laps can. The surface temperature rises. Grip begins to fall. The car becomes harder to place. The driver has to slow slightly more in one corner, and that creates an even weaker exit onto the next straight. The danger begins feeding itself. That was the threat Leclerc faced. He was not only trying to keep Antonelli behind, he was trying to do it without destroying the tires he needed to reach the finish. Mercedes could apply pressure and wait. Ferrari had to calculate how much defense was possible before the cost became too high. And this is where the race moved beyond pure speed. It became psychological. Leclerc knew the Mercedes was stronger in exact places where an attack was easiest. Antonelli knew Leclerc understood that. That knowledge changes the battle. The driver in front may begin protecting a corner before the rival has fully committed. He may sacrifice speed because he expects an attack. The driver behind can use that fear. He can show the car on one side, force a defensive reaction, then return to the faster line. Even without completing the move, he can make the leader slower. This is one of the most powerful forms of pressure in racing.